All right, everyone. We'll get started here in a couple of minutes. Couple of quick announcements. Thanks for everybody showing up today. Again, there's a lot of you, which is fantastic. Honestly, I had expected most people to just be watching these online at this point. So thank you all for being here. Also, thanks last class for people jumping in, asking questions, getting clarification, people sending me emails to get squared away on different concepts and things like that. So keep it up. This is going to be important. Remember that our first quiz is going to be next Wednesday, and it'll just cover the first two modules in the book and our first three lectures. So it's not going to cover a whole lot of information, but these quizzes are going to be probably don't underestimate them. I'm not going to write questions intentionally to try and trick you. But at the end of the day, multiple choice questions are terrible at understanding or getting at what you actually know, right? A lot of the times they're written to just, I've seen this before and I can correctly identify things that I recognize. I'm not going to write questions that way. I want you to be able to demonstrate that you actually understand some of these concepts. So it's going to be a lot of examples, scenarios, and things along those lines. So you just want to make sure that you're up to speed with stuff. So we're going to finish, we're going to get most of the way through our research methods lecture today. We'll finish up next Monday, get that all taken care of. At the end of each one of these lectures, there's going to be a lecture summary and comprehension check slides. Work through that. Make sure that you're doing well with that. Make sure you're going through taking notes, either live as we're doing this now or going back through, writing things down. Samantha posted that you all are going to start having SI sessions the Monday on Mondays, which is good. I'll also do a review session probably 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the night before our exams. Again, we'll use this as the same platform. Have people come in. You all can ask me whatever you want to try and clarify things along those lines. Because again, we want to be over prepared for this first quiz. Remember, you get a drop, and that drop is awesome, but you want to spend that drop when you want to spend that drop, not on the very first trial out the gate because we fumbled right there. And now you're sort of left with fewer degrees of freedom. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that before we jump into lecture material today?
I just have a quick question on the SI.
Yeah.
So I have like a lab on Mondays at that time. So
Okay.
will those be recorded, or are they like not allowed to be recorded? Type of thing. I don't exactly know.
Yeah. Is this Zoe?
Yeah.
Hey, Zoe. Samantha, you can jump in on this, but I believe you probably can record those. And again, in the past, what we've done is any of the handouts that the SI leader has used we'll post those up to WILE courses. So understand there's going to be conflicts with this many people. We're not going to be able to find a time that gets everybody in there. And a lot of people who have like bio stuff, I know, will have lab-based stuff. But Samantha will documents and things like one can be record and two will documents be put up on WILE courses for everyone.
So we've been like strongly encouraged to not record.
Oh, okay.
But I will definitely be posting the documents on my WILE group site, and then I'll have the answer sheet at the end of the week. What I might do is just have like a discussion thread, and all you'll have to do is reply to the discussion thread to get to the answers for the SI session. What a lot of classes do, I'm not sure if this class is going to do it, but a lot of classes you kind of have to go to like a few SIs. It's not like required, but it's very encouraged in other classes, which is why I'm going to do the discussion thread and then have the answers to the worksheets be unlocked that way, just because it shows our SI leaders that when people engage in these SI sessions or they're looking to go through the worksheets themselves at least, that shows us engagement, and we just want to get kind of that feedback And so that's what I think I'll do. And you guys will be able to access it in that way, if that makes sense. I don't know. That was kind of confusing. So if I need to clarify, just let me know.
Yeah. Well, and Samantha, you're not planning to have an SI session this coming Monday, is that correct?
I was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
We're starting next week, yeah. So I have the material for this week, and I'll get that posted this weekend. So
okay.
We'll have access to that.
Cool. So just put this on your calendars. Know that, and are you doing it Monday 6:30? Is that right, Samantha?
Monday at 6:30. Yeah.
Okay. So that will be available. It's not required, but if you can make it, would strongly encourage you to go. Just sort of pop in, do some work through those worksheets. Even if you can't, sounds like those worksheets will be available. You just have to engage in a thread in order to get sort of answers and things along those lines. We'll keep you posted. Again, keep an eye on your email for these announcements. So when those come through, make sure that you're going through reading them, because that's going to have valuable information. But if you're sort of accidentally swiped it and got rid of it, all those announcements will be posted on Wild Courses, so you can always go back through and reference those. Okay, so we'll do that. And then the review session that I'll hold Tuesday at 6, that I will record. So if you absolutely can't make it, you can go back on, review that, everything we went through and talked about. But if you can be there in person, that's always best, because, the questions tend to popcorn well. So like Keely asks a question, and I'm back, this, that, and the other thing. And then Jaden sort of pops in an idea, question that you have, and then so you ask it. And so it's better to be there in person if you can, but we'll just kind of take it as it goes there. Okay. Other questions before we jump into stuff? Yeah.
What time is that on Tuesday that you were talking about?
I'll do it at 6. So we'll go 6 to 7. But if it goes long and people still have questions, you jump in, Julia, jump in or out at any point in time. If you can't make it right there, you can jump in later, or if you have to leave early, that's fine. Don't care. That's just a space for you guys to try and go through and get squared away on concepts and stuff.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
It's not about this stuff, but textbooks. When do we need those by?
Well, a few days ago. Yeah, it's all right. There's I don't know. It's always a nightmare with the bookstore. I try not to get down on the bookstore, but there's things on back order and some of that stuff. But again, go through those announcements, because I've talked about how, and I saw someone had put up, who had, Mackenzie. Where you at, Mackenzie? Oh, Mackenzie. I don't know. Mackenzie's some there. I'm having with Magic Squares, having a hard time finding Mackenzie. But it looks like Mackenzie was able to pop on, get that 14-day free trial through Launchpad. Anybody else, just give me a shout out if you're able to go through and do that.
Me.
Okay, cool. So people, so Trenton, did you have the question about the book?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no worries. So go back through, take a look at those announcements. I'll tell you where to go, how to link in, and what you can do is get a 2-week free trial on Launchpad, and Launchpad will have a copy of the text. That'll tide you over until you're able to get whatever version of that you were looking at.
So what I did was I ordered mine on Amazon, because you can print them there, and I had it in one day. So, and it was also cheaper than on the bookstore.
Yeah. So.
That I did also, and it worked really well.
Okay, cool. So Trent, Keely, both I think great. Any way you can get a hold of the text with sort of at a price that fits in within your schedule is good. The one thing the bookstore will have is access to Launchpad, because it'll have a code in it. The ones you probably pick up that are more affordable probably won't have. Oh, does it have a Launchpad code with it? Trent?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah. If you can did you get a hard copy of the text, or is it just the Launchpad access?
It's this, and it's actually a loose leaf because it was cheaper.
Oh, okay.
I'll just get the rings for that, and then
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Those reps are always trying to like push the loose. Try like keep track of that. Let me know how that loose leaf goes. They're always trying to push loose leaf on me, like, oh, loose leaf. And of course, because they're just paying you for a bunch of pages they print out and they didn't have to bind it or anything, and then you can't sell it back to the university after you're done, which if you want it is fine, but if you're like me, I would keep that all together for about 3 days and then have goddamn pages all over the place. Trent's probably a more organized person than me, but yeah, let me know how that loose leaf goes. They're always trying to and I'm skeptical of it all the time, So whatever works for you in terms of going through and getting stuff done, you'll just want to make sure that you've read through the text, that you've got taken good comprehensive notes, and that you're ready to rock and roll for the stuff. And again, if I were you, remember I said that this quiz, it's 40 questions. You'll have the full hour to go through and take the quiz. If you finish early, good for you, but you have the full hour during class time to take it. But there's going to be 30 questions that say from lecture, and then the last 10 that say from the text. Stuff that's from the text we won't have covered in lecture, and so if you get there and you haven't read the text, you're going to be bummed out. So make sure that you go through, you read, you take notes, and if anything comes up from the text that you're not sure about or have questions about, shoot me an email or come to SI session or review. We'll make sure that you're squared away with stuff. Okay. All right. Feeling good right now? Oh yeah, I'm going to record all of them. So again, this is a weird space we're in. People's computers go up and down and things along those lines. Now, for exams, you're going to have to figure something out, because we can only have those exams for that hour during class period. And so if you let me know that your computer crashed when you're supposed to take the exam, I'm going to say, cool, no worries. You get to drop one. We'll just sort of move on from here. Okay. So you need to make sure that's on track. But for everything else, for these sort of weekly lectures, if you want, they're all going to be recorded. I'm going to post them all. This is a scheme for me to raise my YouTube profile. I'm going to force you all to read my stuff on. I'll be an important person on social media. I think that's how that works. But they're all there and will be available for you to reference either if you missed something or you just want to go back through on your notes. All right, cool. Let's jump into finishing off our last lecture on movements. Okay. Now, remember that when we're thinking about these different movements in psychology, these are important because they've gotten us to where we are in terms of how we think about behavior and how we study it and sort of different theories and things along those lines. And again, as you're trying to keep these theories and movement, or these different movements together, think about these as we're doing this thing, but then we get a group of people who really don't like what's going on here, so we have a reaction to it, right? It's like fashion, it's like music, it's like anything else, right? We're sort of really into this is the hot thing right now, but then someone gets tired of it and they're like, oh, well, what about this that we're not doing? And then it goes through to sort of jump into like, oh, we're not doing this, and so now we're going to focus on this thing. Or this movement is taking a perspective that we don't agree with, so we're going to sort of move in a different direction. Okay, so we had finished up last time with humanistic psychology. Remember that humanistic psychology was a reaction to, things not working. Humanistic psychology, reaction to behaviorism and psychoanalysis both, right? Because behaviorism and psychoanalysis were both very deterministic types of theories, right? If I'm a psychoanalyst, I say all of your behavior is determined strictly by these unconscious drives, okay? Your id, your ego, sort of your life instinct, your death instinct, these things that we can't see or measure, that's what's really driving your behavior. You think you're in charge, but you're actually not. It's these unconscious drives. Behaviorism, less magical, much more scientific, but still very deterministic in their explanation of behavior. My behavior, what I'm doing right now, talking to you all, is not because I choose to or because I want to. It's because I've been reinforced in the past for being a good student and doing my job, and people have said, hey, Dr. Clapp, nice work for doing that good job, and I like that. And so then I'm more likely to go through and do it, right? I think that I showed up just because I wanted to hang out with you guys and see you all this morning, but that's not, from a strict behaviorism standpoint, that's not why I did it. I did it because I've been rewarded for doing this in the past and punished when I didn't, and sort of the total of my learning history is what's driven that. Our humanists said this is garbage. What about free will? What about aspirations? What about the stuff that makes people amazing and excel in sort of this drive to succeed, human spirit type of stuff? And so that's the reaction that came up and started to drive some of the humanistic movement. But again, like all our other movements, some strengths, weaknesses, though, however, again, in terms of the research and sort of the application of some of this stuff. Okay, so that's where we finished up last time. Which takes us to our final movement that we'll talk about with this is our cognitive movement. Cognitive psychology, a movement started around the 70s, and the idea was to start to look at the specific mechanisms by which the mind is starting to process information. Okay, and so your cognitive psychologists most of these folks stemmed out of our behaviorist movement. Okay, so you've got some behaviorists, some really, really strong, hard, strict, like research-focused people, right? But again, remember, origins of behaviorism, radical behaviorism, the idea is we're trying to understand observable human behavior. And so all these things that you're talking about, like your thoughts and feelings, I don't care about your thoughts and feelings. I don't know what thoughts and feelings are. I can't see thoughts and feelings. I can see you behave in certain ways. And so from a radical behaviorism standpoint, that should be our focus, is looking at and trying to understand behavior. All this stuff that we can't see, I don't even recognize that as necessary for understanding sort of humans. Okay. Well, eventually you've got a group of behaviorists who are starting to think, well, to hold the position that people don't have thoughts or that thoughts don't matter or that things going on in your head aren't worth studying, how we perceive stimuli, how our brain processes this it's probably not reasonable to just pretend like this isn't a thing. And so what the cognitive psychologists started to do is take things like sort of thoughts and cognitions and perceptions and treat that as a type of, treat that as a type of behavior, okay? And say we can go through and start to study this. And a big, big influence on the cognitive movement in the 1970s was the computer, okay? We're just starting to have it. In the 70s, we had computers. Computers were like giant mainframes that took up entire rooms, right? Not the things, our phones that we're working with today. But what this group of investigators started to recognize is the computer as a nice analog or a nice model for maybe understanding how our brains start to process information. So if I run my hand across my face, right? What's going on? How is my brain starting to pick up that sensation? I see sort of my bald head is smooth, my beard is kind of rough. Sort of what's going on? How is my brain processing that information to take sort of these physical sort of characteristics and translate that into some sort of feeling, sensation, things along those lines, right? And so what the cognitive psychologists were doing is sort of saying, okay, how can we use observable behaviors to start to draw conclusions about stuff that's going on in my head, right? Sort of perception, attention, sensation. So again, if you're thinking back, this is a lot of the same stuff that went back in the structuralists that they were interested in, right? These sensations, how the brain is processing stuff. And so again, we see this oftentimes, this stuff that started out psychology, cognitive psychology, starting to become more interested in those types of things in a much more sophisticated way, in a way that's much better to sort of get at those types of things, right? We're not relying on introspection at this point, but again, kind of coming full circle and picking up some of those things that started to be important in the origins of psychology. So again, computers, technology started to advance this film, and thinking about the brain as a computer. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's okay. It does an all right job in terms of thinking about how our brains go through problem solve, reason, and things along those lines. Okay. Criticisms of cognitive psychology, again, sort of getting back to some of those things in the original structuralists. A lot of cognitive psychology. If anybody, does anybody here want to be a cognitive psychologist? Good, because it's boring and dry and I don't like it. It's not. It's very, very interesting. And some of the stuff, like as you start to get into perception and experience, starts to rely heavily on philosophy. There's a huge overlook with that. But a lot of the studies we're doing in cognitive psychology are going to be lab-based studies where you have very specific, very controlled types of research. And the question is one of ecological validity. Does my experience and the things that I'm able to perceive and differentiate in the context of a very, very sterile lab environment, does that extend out to sort of the real world, how we all experience things? Pros and cons of this, but maybe one of the criticisms of this approach, but then again, also one of the things that Wundt and the original structuralists were criticized for as well. And again, this gets back into this applied versus basic research type of thing. Okay. Questions about cognitive movement and sort of how this was a reaction to some of the behaviorist stuff that was going on. Cool. All right. So again, lecture summary slide. Make sure that you're going through. This is big picture types of things. The comprehension check. Make sure that you're going through. Again, if you can answer these questions, if you could get your parents on the phone and explain to them what all these things are, assuming that your parents aren't psychologists, because then they'll already know. It's going to tell you that you have a pretty good handle on this stuff. Okay. So again, make sure that you go through and take a look. All right. On to research methods. All righty. Okay. So this next section, going to go through and start to look at some of the tools and processes that are used in modern types of psychological research. And this starts to become important. A lot of times people like, oh, boo methods, and I understand that. I don't know. I teach methods, so I don't say boo methods. I like methods. But I think it's important to start thinking about, before we get into what we think we know about psychology, start to take a look in and sort of understanding how we know things, right? The how starts to become much more important in many ways than the what. For psychological science, the scientific method is our approach to trying to think critically about data, observations, and so how we can start to draw conclusions about different types of psychological phenomena of interest. This starts to become important too. In our history, oftentimes psychology is called a soft science, right? Because it's like, oh, well, it's sort of, yeah, maybe they run some numbers, but it's kind of touchy-feely stuff. Depending on what type of psychology, if you're from a clinical science standpoint, sort of my background, right? If I think something is some way, or I think sort of some intervention is going to work just because I think or feel that it's going to work, that doesn't cut it, right? If I want to bring you in and provide you an intervention, I want to be able to say and know in my head that I have evidence that this is actually something effective, not just because I hope it is or I think it should be. I have all sorts of things that I think should work, and then they don't, fail miserably, right? That's part of the scientific method, to go through and test and try and get some objective information on these things, okay? So pulling from some of your text stuff, when we're talking about science in general, we're talking about the acquisition of systematic knowledge through observation experimentation. We're talking about science as being systemic. Right? What does it mean if something's systemic?
It's standardized.
It's standardized. Yeah. Can you say who was that? Was that Court?
Court Smith.
Okay, Court. So say a little bit about that. What do you mean standardized?
It's a standard method that you apply, and you use the same metric every single time you perform an experiment, so that there's not human error problems.
Okay. Yeah. I like that a lot, right? We're not sort of all over the place, right? We've got a systematic sort of, we do this, we do this, we do this. We take one step at a time, right? I need to know sort of this basic thing before I can go run. This might be the study that I want to look at, but before I get there, I have to clarify some of these other things, right? So we're a systematic, sort of a systematic approach to our research. So it's kind of organized. What about science is objective? What does that mean?
Objective means like it's not opinion anymore. It's just a fact or something you can just look at.
Yeah. Colin, there's always going to be some sort of interpretation in there, right? You and I could see the exact same thing and very easily come up with wildly different interpretations. But the idea is to try and get this as objective as possible, right? Something that we can both say, agree on sort of the shape, the parameter, the things along those, and say, okay, we're looking at the same thing. We can both identify that this is the same thing. We're just interpreting a little bit differently, but trying to be as objective as possible. And then cumulative, right? This idea of building on one another, right? So I do this and I know this, but then I have another experiment that doesn't go the right way. So I think maybe that's a fluke, but I do it again and again, and I'm still getting the same thing. I'm like, okay, I need to make a change here. I need to revise my assumptions because it looks like what I'm doing isn't building. This cumulative thing is also nice because it means that I don't have to start from square one so I do research in trauma and anxiety. I don't have to start from the very beginning. I can stand on the shoulders of giants, take sort of the existing knowledge base and sort of move forward. Okay. And so again, the scientific method provides our sort of approach to understanding mental processes, behaviors, interactions, stuff that's very, very controversial. We'll get into a lot of controversial stuff this semester, and things that are really kind of fuzzy constructs. But again, the scientific method gives us a way to start to sort of draw some inferences about how people work. So that's fine. That sounds cool and fancy if you want to get into that egghead stuff. But why not just rely on common sense, intuition, gut feelings, right? This is a thing that oftentimes we run into back, oh, psychology is common sense. People will do what people do, whatever, right? Why do we have to sort of make it more complicated than it is? Well, as human beings, and this is all of us, not just some of us, all of us really, really bad at just independently synthesizing information, okay? Some things that we know we are all vulnerable to a person. Things like hindsight bias, okay? Think about this as armchair quarterbacking, okay? When we're talking about hindsight bias, we tend to sort of view things that have happened in the past that have already happened as much more predictable than they were than before they took place, okay? So for an example, think about, like, I was looking on my notes. I have had a Hurricane Katrina for a long time, but a lot of you were like 5 when that happened or younger, so I need to sort of update my thing. What about the 2016 election? Okay, we had Clinton Trump, right? And before, it was everybody was pretty clear that Clinton was going to win in a landslide. But then that didn't happen, right? And then afterwards, looking back, oh, this was for sure going to happen. Oh, yeah, we should have saw. This was obvious that this was going to be a thing. This is hindsight bias. Yeah, when we already know the thing, the answer, then it's easy to say, oh, and start to come up with reasons why this happened and why it was obvious. But beforehand, right, it's a different thing, okay? Think about this. And I'm not asking you to chime in on this or sort of identify yourself, but just think in your own head. You ever been in a bad relationship? Think about a bad relationship that you were in, and then after that relationship is over, thinking back, oh, well, I should have known that person was a bum, or that person was no good, or that this was going to happen. It was clear from the beginning, right? Well, if it was clear from the beginning and you would have known all that stuff, you probably wouldn't have gotten in a relationship with that person to begin with, right? But on the back end, knowing how it all turned out, then it all seems kind of obvious, right? This is that hindsight bias, sort of looking back and thinking that things were more predictable than they were before they happened. We also tend to be overconfident, okay? We are much more confident in our knowledge than we are accurate in our knowledge, Okay. I see this all the time. And it gets in people's head when we're doing in class stuff. What I will typically do if we had our usual lecture for these quizzes, I make everybody sit there for at least a half an hour. I don't care if you're done; you're just going to hang out there because I don't want you getting in other people's heads by getting up because you're done in 10 minutes, right? So someone tell me you're in a class, big class, you're struggling with an exam, and someone's done super fast. What's the first thing that pops into your head?
I'm an idiot.
Yeah, why, Cameron?
Because it takes me forever to do this test and this guy finished in 10 minutes.
Yeah, let me tell you what happened when that guy finished in 10 minutes. That guy didn't do good, okay? And this is the thing, right? So we like go through and you'll ask people like, oh, how did you do? Like, oh, it was easy. I finished in 10 minutes. I crushed it. Like, you did not crush it. Like, you were far more overconfident in sort of what you did as opposed to being accurate about it, right? And we see this all the time. Sort of this Fernbach study down at the corner of the slide. Some research that was done looking at it's in Nature, right? That went through and looked at people's beliefs about genetically modified food, and the people with the strongest beliefs and the most certain about genetically modified food systematically know the least about genetically modified food, right? So we're much more confident in sort of what we know than what we know is accurate. Okay, and so this starts to become problematic. Anybody a CJ major, criminal justice major, or have had taken classes in criminal justice? Anybody?
Class in juvenile justice.
Okay, Cade. So juvenile justice. I don't know. And sort of, Cade, you don't have to answer this, or anybody can. What do we know about eyewitness testimony? Is eyewitness testimony a good thing or a not so good thing?
It depends, because usually the witness can be biased
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah, it's oftentimes pretty friggin' terrible. Okay, but when you ask someone, are you sure that this is the person you saw? Yes, 100% certain that this is the person I saw. That person was in a completely different state at the time this thing happened. There was no possible way you could have saw this, right? And so, but we start to fall prey to this because there's a lot of people that are convicted based on eyewitness accounts that are horribly, horribly accurate. So we put more emphasis, we're much more confident in our ability to identify information than we are accurate with things. Okay. We also see we're really good at human beings at detecting patterns, even when patterns aren't there. Okay. Let's say you're taking a multiple choice exam. All right. Pick on somebody who. All right. Never mind. I won't pick on somebody else. I was scrolling down through to try and find someone to identify here. But think in your own mind. All right. So you're taking a multiple choice exam. So you sort of question 1, you say answer is C. Question 2, going through answer C. Question 3, go through answer C. At this point, what are you thinking in your head?
There's no way they can all be C.
Yeah. Now I'm starting to second guess myself because I'm saying there's certainly no way that all 3 of these answers could be C. Now I'm going through second guess. How likely is it that all 3 successive answers could be a C? It's almost a certainty, right? It's going to happen all the time, right? But we start to see patterns when there aren't patterns. It's just random stuff. Anybody superstitious? You can give a shout out if you're superstitious. I don't think you need. Some people are superstitious. Right?
I wouldn't say superstitious, but I'm a little stitious.
a little stitious, right? Well, what we do when we're getting a little stitious is we start to identify patterns that aren't really there, right? We start to see things. Well, I did this, and this good thing happened, and then I did this thing again, and a good thing happened, and this thing happened again. So this is a pattern, right? So now all of a sudden, I've got some stuff that I'm doing. So I've got this whole sort of routine that I do because this is what I need to do to be successful, and this helps me be successful. It's just the misidentification of patterns.
Ritualistic superstition.
What's that?
It's like ritualistic superstition, where it's like you do something beforehand, and if you don't, then you'll think you'll fail.
Yeah, it's huge in sports, and a lot of people, and particularly, I don't know, like, I don't want to target older generations, but sort of grandmas, sort of grandpas, sort of older folks, be like, oh no, you got to do this in order for this to work out well, right? It's not that came out of nowhere, right? Or that people are fools. It's just we're really good at picking up patterns, sort of based on random stuff. Okay. We also have a terrible tendency towards confirmation bias, and everybody is this way. What we do is I've got a thing in my head that I think is true. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to start to cherry pick stuff that's consistent with my belief, and stuff that's not consistent with my belief, I'm going to ignore it. Okay? This is how conspiracy theories get sort of really, really ingrained in folks. Okay? Anybody have sort of friend, family member, someone that they know, and again, you don't have to shout out or talk about it, but someone who's super into conspiracy theories, right? I've got an uncle that says the NBA is all rigged from the beginning. They know who's going to win. And the whole thing is just sort of basically an elaborate play. And I'm like, so what? That guy just hit that buzzer beater on to seal it right there at the end. So that was staged. He's like, yep, that's all staged from the very beginning, right? It's not, right? But if I believe that, what I do is I start to identify things that are consistent with my belief, or could be consistent with my belief, or things that I could construe to be consistent with my belief, and anything that's not consistent, I systematically ignore that stuff, right? So things like sort of flat Earth, sort of moon landings, sort of things along these lines, people will start to get really, really tied in, and confirmation bias will help us sort of make those beliefs really stable.
I'm from Southern California, and Huntington Beach is like one of the worst cities around us with like COVID and masks and stuff, and like half of them are all conspiracy theorists about how COVID-19 isn't a real thing, and it's fake, and it's propagated by government.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that, and you can see like how people will start to gravitate towards some of that stuff, and it's a free country. You can believe whatever you want to believe. Sometimes sort of the things we believe are sort of put other people at risk, and that's not so great. And sometimes sort of the things we believe put ourselves at risk. I don't know, the flat Earth guy shot himself up into sort of low space last year, and then then it came crashing down, which is why amateur people don't blast themselves or shouldn't be blasting themselves into space, right? But what we can see is when we're looking at this from the outside, you're like, how do people sort of maintain this? A lot of it's confirmation bias, right? Anything that's counter to what I want to believe, or is and it's not necessarily intentional. It's just a natural thing we do as human beings. Okay, so what we want to do with critical thinking is go through and analyzing, synthesizing, applying different information to try and sort of get some sort of objective bead on sort of what's going on, what do we know, what does the evidence support, what does it not support, and a lot of times, the things that we really wanted to turn out don't turn out, but if we're being scientific about it, we then have to change our assumptions. So, what we need or want to start out with our research is some sort of theory. Okay, a theory here. Our definition, I think I pulled this from Myers. An integrated collection of propositions intended to account for a specific class of phenomena. Our theory is how things work. Essentially, it's our explanation of how things work and fit together. Okay, and what we want to do is have before we jump into research, is some idea, some sort of model about whatever it is I'm interested in, how this goes through and sort of connects together. Okay, now there's nothing inherently good about a theory. Okay, I can have a theory. My theory is that COVID is spread around by aliens. Right, that aliens, sort of microscopic aliens from Mars, are in tiny spaceships and infecting random people and are here to take over our Earth. That's my theory, right? That is a theory. It's not a good theory for obvious reasons. But if we go through and look at our history and psychology, we get all sorts of theories that are probably not great. Anybody interested or familiar with the theory of phrenology? Colin, what's phrenology?
It's the study of the shape of the bumps on the surface of the skull they thought it would determine how big certain parts of your brain are and how developed certain parts of your brain are.
Yeah.
That ended up not being true.
Yeah. So I'm a phrenologist's dream. Okay. You go through, rub my head, feel the bumps and sort of where things are coming up. And the idea is the theory was, and I can see how this kind of makes sense. In the 1800s, the idea is like, oh, what's going to go is certain parts of your brain are going to develop. And those parts of the brain, they're like muscles, right? They're going to get bigger and stronger. And if I've got this part of my brain that's big and strong, it's going to sort of give me a bump in my skull because it's bigger and stronger. And what we can do by then sort of feeling your head is we're going to identify where your brain is more developed and where you're going to be able to identify whether or not you're sort of an empathic person or you're a budding criminal and that's going to come out, or if you're smart in math or sort of extroverted or something along these lines, right? It's a theory, but it's not a good theory, right? And so we can go through it, and what we want to do is make sure that what we're working for is something that actually fits in with science. And so properties of a good theory. One, our theories should organize characteristics and observations. Okay, so if I'm interested in, I've got a theory of aggression, let's say. And so my theory of aggression should do a good job of identifying different types of aggression, explaining why that behavior occurs, and why some people are more likely to engage in the types of aggression that I'm interested in relative to other people. Okay, and so our theory should not just like, oh, it's going to get this one piece. It should get a sort of anything that I'm interested in. It should all kind of tie it neatly together. If I've got a theory that says, oh, x equals y, except when it doesn't, then y equals x, that's not a good theory because you can't have it both ways, right? It needs to be something that sort of organizes things together, okay? We should also have a good theory leading to predictions about the behavior. If I've got a good model, right, of how things work, I should be able to say, okay, if I know these things, okay, I should be able to predict what is going to happen sort of at some point down the road, okay? If I have a good theory of aggression, I should be able to say, well, this individual with this characteristic is at higher risk for engaging in aggressive behavior than this other person. Okay, and then if I make that prediction, I need to be able to test that prediction. Okay, this is part of what takes science away from the realm of philosophy, religion, and things along those lines. Right? I might hold a worldview of why things happen that involves sort of religious beliefs and things along these lines. And that's a fine theory to have, right? But it's not a scientific theory because I can't test it, right? I can't ask God, hey, did you make this happen because of X, Y, and Z? That's not something that we can do, right? And so that's not saying that religious beliefs are bad or anything like that. It's just saying that it's not something that fits well within psychological science in terms of a theory of how things work and some of that type of thing, right? Same thing with this is the problem with the psychoanalysis and a lot of Freud's theory. A lot of stuff's not testable, right? I can have the exact two people with wildly different backgrounds and the same thing happens to them. I'm like, oh yeah, well, it can happen this way. Unless it doesn't, then it happens this way. And I can't really test whether or not your id's in overdrive or your life instincts or death instincts. If I can't go through and test it and I can't observe it, then it's not a really good theory. Okay. So last thing that we want to be thinking about is a good theory providing a basis for an operational definition. Okay. Our operational definition tells us sort of whether or not something is there, are we seeing it, and how much of it is there sort of going on, right? So if we think about, again, going back to that aggression example, I have a theory of aggression. My theory of aggression should give me some sort of parameters for how I know aggression, or how do I know aggression is happening when I see it. Okay? Give me a shout out. Does anybody not understand what aggression, or not? I won't ask you to yell and say, yeah, I don't understand what aggression is. If anybody, everybody sort of understand. If I say, oh, someone's being aggressive, kind of in your head, you kind of understand what's going on, right? Like, oh, okay, I sort of understand. I'm fluent in the English language. I understand what's happening, right? But if I were to take all of you, so my wife works at the university, but also at an elementary school. If I were to take you to Tara's elementary school, have her and sort of watch kids on the playground, and asked you all to sort of record the number of aggressive events that you've seen, are you all going to come up with the same number? Nope, you're not. It's going to be way off base, right? Everybody's going to be a little bit different or a lot different. And some of that is because it's chaos and maybe you don't catch everything, but a lot of it's going to be different people are identifying aggression differently than other people. Okay? If we were all in person, Julie, I'm going to use you as an example because you're on my screen right now. So I would walk up. So you're talking about aggression, and be like, "Oh, what's aggression?" And Julie's like, "Oh, it's when if you hit somebody or something like that." I'm like, "Okay." And then maybe Julie, I walk up to you as you're sitting in your seat, and I'm very close to you, kind of menacing over the top. I'm not touching you. I'm not saying anything, but I'm definitely sort of breaking social norms in terms of how close I'm standing. Right? I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'3". Are you 6'3"? Right. So if I'm menacing over the top of you and I say, "Does this feel aggressive?" You're probably going to say, "Yeah, that feels aggressive to me." Right. But I'm not touching you. I'm not doing anything. Right. Ramon, I see you up on my screen right now too. Right. Let's say, okay. So we agree that that's sort of invading somebody's space. That's aggressive. Right. But then I asked Ramon, I'm like, "Hey, Ramon, so what kind of music do you like?" And you're like, "Oh," and let's say we're kind of friends, right? Or sort of in the same social group. And I say, "Ramon, what kind of music do you like?" You're like, "Oh, I like X, Y, and Z bands." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool for some people if you're into that," right? Is that aggressive?
No.
You don't think that's aggressive?
I don't really think that's aggressive, honestly.
Well, it kind of depends on what type of aggression we're talking about, right?
It's just how you perceive, like, what type of music, too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but if I say that in a way to, and we're in a group of people, and it's kind of dismissive, and sort of create a power differential between you and I, we could talk about that as relational aggression, right? When we talk about differences in men and women in terms of aggressive behavior, sometimes we do see men tend to be more towards physical aggression, but women are really good at sort of, well, men are too, but we see group level differences oftentimes in relational aggression, higher levels in women as opposed to men, right? And so, again, it depends on what we're looking at and how we're identifying things. So, Ramon, if we're just interested on the playground looking at physical aggression, then yeah, that interaction probably wouldn't count, right? But what we've done is we've set up a definition to say, yep, that's not the type of thing we're looking for. But if we're looking at aggression more broadly, maybe that is, right? And so these are the types of things that we need to go through with our research to be very, very clear in terms of how we're identifying things. Okay. All right.
I have a question about aggression.
Yeah.
So, like in the book, it talks about like they try to see if people have aggressive behavior by determining if they'll like deliver a loud noise to someone.
Mm-hmm.
How did they like come up with that as being like their theory? Because obviously they didn't want them to actually be aggressive and harm them. They wanted to do it in a way that would be like safe in a lab environment. So how do they decide that? Yeah,
that's and again, this starts to come back to your argument on sort of what are we measuring and how do we know it is what it is, right? And that a lot of times comes in to be able to make an argument. And I would argue, we've used this paradigm in my lab, it's very, very common, right? Because again, if I'm interested in aggression, I can't say, have you come in and be like, "Oh, I'm going to pitch you against somebody else and you guys are going to have to duke it out." That's not ethical research to do, right? But what I can do is I can set up a situation where you are in a position to deliver something that is aggressive, this loud aversive noise, and it's pretty loud and aversive, as a way to model aggressive behaviors, right? And so is it exactly the type of aggression is it people going out and assaulting and potentially killing other people? No. Is it a type of aggression? Yes. And then we have to sort of make a determination on whether or not this thing that we're measuring is actually getting at the construct I'm interested in measuring. Okay. And so, and that starts to get into that ecological validity thing that we talked about before, right? If I can do a lab-based experiment, so again, I do trauma-based research, right? And so if I do trauma-focused research, it's not ethical for me to bring you into the lab and put you in a car and slam you against a wall or have someone jump out of the corner and beat you up just to see what happens then in terms of trauma reactions down the road, obviously, right? But some types of experimental studies might have people come in and watch maybe a film that's really, really sort of pretty graphic and upsetting, right? And we talk about that as an analog of a trauma event, right? Now, does that experimental thing get at the same types of things that we would be interested in actual real clinical trauma? I don't know, right? And so it starts to become, it depends probably on what we're trying to study and what we're trying to get at, and then making sure that our methods map onto sort of what we're trying to do there. Awesome. All right. We're right at time, so I don't want to keep you over. So we'll pick up with scientific method stuff on Monday. But questions about anything here that we've covered? And again, if you need to split, if you've got other classes to go to, you can bounce. Thanks for coming through. But if people have questions, want to stay on, so we can go through and do that. So questions about any of the material we covered up to this point?
Are the text questions that are going to be on the quiz? You said there's going to be like 10. Like
Yeah.
the other 30 are going to be from the lecture.
Yeah.
Are they going to be like specific, or are they just going to be like how you know that we read?
No, that's right. So
Like I don't want to be like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, no. I think Sage, is this Sage? Is that you who are asking the question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You all are busy, and I'm open to the possibility that PSYC isn't your 100% the favorite thing to be doing right now. And so if I'm going to have you read things, I want it to be for something, not just to do, but because it's helping you sort of understand psychological phenomena. And then also, this is the other thing that happens. So if you've already started reading the book, you're going to see there's a huge amount of overlap between the text and the stuff that we're presenting in lecture. It's not all the same, but there's a good deal of overlap. My goal is to have you read the text. We don't have enough time in lecture to cover everything I would want to. So the text is a nice way to sort of touch on some of those topics that we don't have time to get to in lecture. But then it's also going to reinforce the stuff because it's going to give you a different perspective. You're going to have Myers talking to you about it, giving you different examples and stuff like that. And so what I want for you in terms of reading that text, and sort of one, it's good for our class, and two, it's good to be good for other classes that you get into. This is one of the things you get into university. It's kind of hard to sort of, you've got to make that adjustment between your professors aren't going to, they're going to expect you to pick information up on your own. This is a good way to sort of start to get used to some of that stuff. And so in terms of the questions, it'll be specific questions about stuff. And it'll be the same type of thing, wanting you to understand concepts and examples and things along those lines. So it will be, you want to make sure that you understand, have a good conceptual understanding, and could describe it to other people. This is where some of the Launchpad stuff is good, because it'll go through and ask you questions and things along those lines. The thing I will say is there's a lot of like names and dates and stuff like that in this section. You don't have to worry about dates. You can look up dates. Like we have phones in our back pocket. We can look up. I don't expect you to know when William James published a textbook or anything like that, or what anybody's birthday is. So don't worry about that stuff. Focus more on sort of conceptually with the movements. You're going to want to know kind of just who goes with what in terms of names and stuff like that. But like the dates and stuff like that, don't worry about that. Or I'm not going to sort of say, oh, this specific study said what. That's not going to be a thing. Does that help?
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
I was just thinking too. I was mostly worried about dates because.
Yeah. I don't know. Dates are for suckers. I can sort of pull that up and not like, you know, no one is ever going to put a gun to your head and to ask when Edward Titchener was born. Like, that's not a real thing. If you need to know when Edward Titchener's birthday is, you'll probably have enough time to go through, and that'd be a really crappy action movie, right? It's going to blow. You need to know when Titchener was born because that's the code. not a real life situation. So, don't worry about dates so much. Focus more on concepts and sort of application and what they mean. Other questions?
Are we allowed to use our notes on the quizzes? Or?
Yeah. I mean, normally, no, right? Because we're in person, but I also can't police you all at all points in times. And we're also going to pull that honor lock thing. And so you're going to have what you're going to have. But who was this? Jonathan, did you ask, or who?
This was me.
Oh, Trent. Okay. Trent. And if I'm not telling you can't, you'd probably be dumb if you didn't have anything there. I mean, just the reality of the situation. But what I will say is you need to walk into this. If you're going to be successful, you need to walk in these quizzes because you're only going to have so much time, right? And what you need to do is walk into that quiz being ready to sit down and take it and confident in your abilities to just go through and take it without your notes. Because otherwise, if you hit question 1 and you spend 5 minutes looking stuff up, and you hit question 2 and do the same thing, you're going to get halfway through the thing and then it's going to time you out and you're going to run out of time, right? And then you're going to be bummed, right? But so what I want to do is try and set this up so that it's sort of forcing you to sort of know this material, things along those lines. So yeah, if you have something there and you reference it, that's sort of on you. And it probably wouldn't be a terrible idea. Just don't plan on like, I'm just going to look up stuff in my book because you're going to run out of time. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is module 3 going to be on this first quiz?
Nope. Modules will just cover up to sort of whatever it is where we're at. So yeah, module 3 is just going to be, you won't have to worry about that. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to go through and I'll post this in an announcement. I'm going to fire off just some like practice questions. And these aren't practice questions like to get you prepared for stuff. It's just, I know that when you're in a new class, first exam with a new professor is always stressful. You don't know what this guy's going to ask you or how things are going to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and post just like a handful of what questions will likely look like. So you can kind of get a feel for that. And then some suggestions on sort of test taking stuff in terms of how, because a lot of multiple choice isn't, I necessarily need to know with 100% accuracy what the answer is. If I can go through and start crossing out stuff that I know it's not, even if I don't know with 100% accuracy what the answer is, I can narrow it down from 1 and 4 to maybe 1 and 2, right? And that's just good test taking strategy. I created a video. I go through and post up some of that stuff so you can go through and take a look at that. So for this first one, it'll just be the 3 lectures, which is actually just the 2 DEXA slides and the 2 modules. That'll be it in terms of stuff for the quiz.
For your review that's on Tuesday, will those questions be a part of that, or are you just going to post that separately?
I'm just going to post that separately. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. This is just to kind of give you an idea of the types of things that what those questions might look like. I think the thing that gets people trapped is multiple choice is easy because I just say the definition, sort of which of the following is a definition of structuralism or something like that. And you could say, okay, that's what this is. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to say, Michael is super into understanding sensation and the basic atoms of the mind, and he's wicked German. So he is sort of, which of the following sort of is most like, and so then you go through and say, it's sort of structuralism and stuff like that, right? So it's requiring you to sort of take information and sort of say, okay, this is consistent with this type of movement, as opposed to which of the following is a definition of a theory or something like that, right? Does that help, Jaden? Cool. Other questions?
I had a question about Launchpad.
Okay, yeah.
I was finally able to actually get on it, but I was wondering where within the site do I find the actual text versus quizzes and modules?
Yeah. So, Jonathan, did you say that you did get into you did get in a Launchpad?
Yeah, I had to set up an account 4 different times.
Okay.
Whatever
cool.
issue they're at.
Yeah. Just on the left column, there should be a tab that just says ebook, and you just click that, and it sort of pops it up.
I have a question about Launchpad.
Yeah.
As far as like, I ordered my textbook through the university, so I don't know if they have the number that I need to log in to get the ebook. Do you know how I can do that?
Yeah, if you ordered you ordered your text through the university, and are they just shipping it to you?
Well, I had them ship it to my dorm, or not to my dorm, but so I can pick it up when I get there on the 6th.
Okay. Yeah. So you'll want to.
So I'm already at the dorms, and I already got mine, and I got it through the textbook. And there's this that comes in it. You open it up, and it has your code in it.
Okay.
One of those things where you scratch it off.
Cool. Thanks, Colin. So Zoe, but you're not going to get on campus in time to get that before our first quiz. So what you should do is, again, on the syllabus, go to the Launchpad thing, and there's a link that takes you directly to our site. Go through, click on that, set up a 14-day free trial, and what you'll have is access to an ebook and sort of all that type of stuff, so that you can go through, take notes, make sure that you've read those modules online. Because by the time you get here at the 6th, we'll already be past that. So just make sure that you do that before this first quiz.
Thank you.
Yep. Cool. Other questions?
That first quiz is Wednesday, right?
Yep. First quiz is Wednesday. Yep.
Heard that.
And the Tuesday review starts this week, right?
Yep. We'll do that, and I'll send out a link or a notification announcement to everybody and say, hey, so this is when it's coming on. And so again, the structure of those reviews is going to be, I'm not going to prepare anything. I'll have the slides and stuff like that. What I want you to do is come with questions. You say, hey, I'm still having a hard time teasing apart structuralists and functionalists, or I read this thing in the text, I didn't really understand it, or I'm really struggling with experimental design and trying to figure out what's going on with that. Like, those are the types of things. If you come in, and I'll just sort of go through and explain whatever you want to go through and do. Not good questions for review, or like things like what are going to be on the test. I don't know. Anything could be on the test. If it was covered, it's sort of open there, right? Are you going to ask us about this? Like, well, maybe. I don't know. Could be. I would study it. Sort of. I don't know. So just coming through is more clarification stuff. But again, I'll stay on there, help you guys out for as long as you want. We'll start at 6. But again, if you need to go as you need, that's completely cool. And then also we'll record it like everything else and just post that up so people can go through and access it. If you've got job, sort of other commitments, labs, things like that, that keep you from being able to attend live. Or this is the other thing too. If you can attend live, because you got, so again, I know there are going to have people with like bio labs and exams and stuff like that that conflict. Send me an email. Say, hey, I can't make it, but I would like to, I'm sort of struggling with these things. Could you answer these questions in the review? I'll go through and make sure that we get those covered, and then you can just pick it up on a video later on. So either of those work.
I had a question too.
Yeah.
So the quizzes, they're going to be during our scheduled meeting times, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just making, because I know I have some classes that are like have this different set time, for quizzes and exams. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's with a class like this, and I mean, I'm not saying that I think everybody would do this, but I'm also not a dummy. I want you to be able to go through and demonstrate your knowledge because of the hard work that you put in, and I don't want, if Ramon, you put in a bunch of hours and you're ready to rock and roll with this, I don't want Zoe just have someone else take it and get all the answers and then get 100% because she just got all the answers from her friend who took it earlier or something like that, right? So, not that you would do that, Zoe. I just saw you and so used you as an example. So what we'll do is we'll have that quiz will be open through YO courses. It'll start up at 11. It'll close I'll probably close it at 12. You'll have those 60 minutes to go through and, I don't know. Yeah. So you'll have that time to go through and take the quiz, but then it'll shut down. And so it's going to be it's pulling the the lockdown browser will sort of help make sure that people don't run into problems and things like that. And I know that I would just say, when these quizzes are going to be throughout the whole rest of the semester. Just do whatever you need to do to make sure that you have a solid internet connection and a working computer. And if you don't have one of those personally on you, get in touch with IT. They'll be able to help you out, sort of work through that stuff, so that because those times that's game time. You need to be able to rock and roll for that. Rest of the semester, you can catch things online wherever you want to, but for those quizzes, and we won't have lecture or anything like that. It'll open up. We won't even meet. You'll just get on. You'll do it. You'll get off, and that'll be that day.
And that's every other Wednesday, right?
Yeah. So if you go through and Julia, you go through and take a look at on the syllabus, the tentative course schedule. All those are mapped out. It's just kind of a nice system because what's going to happen. It's every sixth lecture we're going to have sort of an evaluation on the material we've covered. It breaks things into manageable chunks. You kind of get in a rhythm. It keeps everybody kind of on schedule, which is going to help out with stuff. Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I meant to bring it up earlier because when I was reading Module 2, it's like a conceptual thing, but with the overconfidence and the confirmation bias, is it possible that we go through these biases more as like a defense mechanism? Because like in the reading, it kind of makes it seem like we're just automatically going to think we're smarter, but is there are these biases more pushed out? Like if, you call someone out about a subject as if they don't know it, or someone's feeling down, they want to confirm something that'll make them feel better.
Oh, Michael, you are a budding social psychologist. I think those are all excellent hypotheses. And we're going to talk about that when we get into the social psych area. Sometimes we can push. No one likes to be wrong. No one's like, sweet, I was completely way off base with that. I'm feeling real good about myself, right? But sort of the idea is sort of being open and recognizing that sometimes we're not right, and that's fine. As long as we can sort of change course and sort of take in new information and things like that. But different people are different people. Sometimes people are better at that than other people, and sometimes it's because I sort of really, really worried about people thinking negative things about me, or that, if I do this, then someone will think that I'm not smart, and that's super threatening to me. So there are whole areas of psychology that go into that stuff. For our purposes, don't even worry about that, right? So just kind of, as long as you know what confirmation bias is, overconfidence is, things along those lines, you're going to be in good shape.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
you. Yep. Anything else? Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, if things come up, fire off an email. Let me know. Again, thanks for being understanding. Had a conflict. I was giving a presentation to some folks in Boston during our office hours yesterday. So apologies if you need to or have questions about things. Just let me know. Again, send me an email from your university account, so I don't send it back and say, please send it from your university account. I just want to make sure that you're who you are. But yeah, keep after it. So just make sure that you've got material stuff from the text covered this weekend, and that way you've got it all under control, and you can spend next week as we roll up to this first quiz just getting strong on it, as opposed to trying to the night before take notes and on everything else. So cool. All right, folks. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much. This has been a great, I think, start to semester. I kind of like this system. I mean, I would prefer to be in person, but I think this is doing okay. But let me know if you run into hiccups as we move forward with stuff. All right. We'll see y'all later. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. Be healthy.